Wenn ihr euch daneben benehmt und meine Familie...
July 24th, 2026.
Und dann hätte das Gremium entschieden, nee.
Frankfurt. Jürgen Klopp sits down in front of the journalists as the new head coach of the German national team. It has been just over 2 years since he announced his departure from Liverpool and said something almost no one expected to hear from him. I am running out of energy. Klopp spent 9 years at Anfield. He won the Champions League, brought the English League title back to the club, and became someone capable of making the entire city believe in almost anything. But the constant matches, the pressure, and the need to energize the players, the supporters, and the entire club every single day gradually drained him. Klopp stepped away from the touchline, rejected offers from top clubs, and several months later became Red Bull's head of global soccer. He was 57. He still wanted to work, but he no longer wanted to live between training sessions, matches, and press conferences. In Germany, not everyone accepted his decision. Supporters of Mainz and Borussia Dortmund accused Klopp of betraying his own values. But his contract with Red Bull contained one special condition. Klopp could leave if the German Football Association came calling. So the man who could no longer imagine himself on the touchline had already left himself one possible road back. After Germany's failure at the World Cup and Julian Nagelsmann's resignation, that call finally came. Klopp accepted and signed a contract until 2030. Why did the German national team make him return to the job that had left him completely exhausted? Perhaps the answer first appeared during his childhood, in training sessions with a father who never allowed Jurgen to win simply because he was a child. Jürgen Klopp was born in Stuttgart, but grew up in Glatten, a small village in the Black Forest, where children were expected to show discipline, humility, and a willingness to work. The most important person in his upbringing was his father, Norbert. As a young man, he dreamed of becoming a professional goalkeeper, but never built a major football career. When the family's only son was born, all of his attention shifted to Jürgen. In the summer, his father made him play football and tennis. In the winter, they went skiing. Norbert never let his son win, and did not believe that a child should be protected from defeat. Klopp especially remembered their runs together. His father would give him a small head start, catch him a few seconds later, and overtake him with ease. Then he would demand that Jürgen run faster. This continued for years. Can you imagine how frustrating it must be for a child to have a father who beats him every single time and does not even pretend that the contest was close? One day, Jürgen finally overtook Norbert. For his father, it was just another training session. For Klopp, it was proof that constant defeats eventually stop being defeats, as long as you keep working. His mother, Elizabeth, balanced out his father's strictness. She supported her son and gave him the warmth that was rarely available from Norbert. Later, that same balance would appear in Klopp's own work. He would shout at his players, demand maximum intensity from them, and then hug them as if they were part of his own family. But during his childhood, very little suggested that he would one day become a great coach. Jürgen dreamed of becoming a surgeon, but his school grades quickly destroyed that plan. At his graduation ceremony, the head teacher told him, "I hope football works out for you, because your prospects in every other field do not look particularly promising." Football was not simple either. Klopp was good enough to become a professional, but he understood perfectly well that he did not have enough talent to reach the very top. His father died from liver cancer in 2000. He never got to see his son take charge of Mainz, lead the club into the Bundesliga, and become one of the most famous coaches in the world. But Norbert taught him the most important lesson of all. When your opponent is stronger, you keep running until the difference disappears. On the pitch, Klopp compensated for his lack of talent with the thing that worked best of all: his own mind. Klopp's professional playing career was spent almost entirely at Mainz. Over 11 years, he made more than 300 appearances, started out as a striker, and was later moved to the right side of defense. The reason was simple. Klopp understood his own limitations perfectly. One day, he watched Andreas Möller in training and thought, "If what Möller is playing is called football, then I must be playing a completely different sport." Later, Klopp described himself even more accurately. "I had 4th division feet and a 1st division head." His body did not allow him to dominate opponents, so he began studying football more deeply than everyone else. Klopp closely observed the training sessions of Wolfgang Frank, the man who abandoned the traditional German sweeper and began building a zonal defense based on the principles of Arrigo Sacchi. At the same time, Jürgen studied at the University of Frankfurt, worked at a video rental shop, and unloaded trucks to support his family. In the 1980s, he married Sabina, and they had a son, Mark, who later chose amateur football. Even the subject of Klopp's university thesis was unexpected. The future creator of one of the most intense styles in football wrote a study about race walking, the biomechanics of movement, endurance, and load distribution. It was at Mainz that an episode occurred which Klopp later remembered with particular delight. A psychologist asked the players to draw a tree so that their personality traits could be determined from the picture. Jürgen filled the entire A4 sheet with his tree. He simply did not know how to draw small details. The psychologist looked carefully at the drawing and declared, "Now that is enormous self-confidence." From that moment on, Klopp joked that self-confidence had become his favorite hobby. In 2001, his family life changed. Jürgen and Sabina divorced. Almost at the same time, his playing career came to an end. On February 27th, Klopp played his final match as a footballer. And on the very next day, Mainz's management offered him the job of head coach, with the team sitting in the relegation zone. Only yesterday, he had been changing beside those players in the dressing room. Now he had to tell them who would be left on the bench, how they should defend, and why they had to trust him. Klopp saved Mainz, and then led the club into the Bundesliga for the first time in its history. But his energy would truly explode later, in a city searching for a coach to lead a team standing on the edge of financial collapse. At Mainz, Klopp proved that he could make teams stronger than their limitations. He saved the club from relegation, led them into the Bundesliga for the first time, and reached European competition. But after returning to the second division, the team twice failed to win promotion again. In 2008, Klopp left. At that moment, Borussia Dortmund were looking for a coach for a club that had survived a severe financial crisis. There was no money for established stars, so the new team had to be built around young and inexpensive players. That was exactly the kind of challenge Klopp wanted. He demanded that, after losing the ball, his players should not retreat. They had to charge forward immediately and try to win it back before the opposition could even begin an attack. Klopp believed that a successful ball recovery near the opposition goal could create a more dangerous chance than a pass from the world's best playmaker. His teams played at enormous speed, pressed constantly, and forced opponents to make decisions under pressure. That was how the style people began calling heavy metal football was born. Under Klopp, Robert Lewandowski, Mats Hummels, Mario Götze, and Shinji Kagawa all developed into major players. His relationship with Lewandowski was particularly difficult. The Polish striker later described Klopp as both a father figure and a strict teacher. Jürgen was not only a father figure to me. As a coach, he was like a strict, bad teacher who put pressure on you and did everything possible to squeeze the maximum out of you. The results came quickly. Borussia Dortmund won the Bundesliga twice in a row, lifted the German Cup, and reached the Champions League final. But something else mattered even more. Klopp restored the club's sense of unity. The players, the coach, and the stands reacted to every match as one team. Despite all his emotion, he never tried to appear overly serious. When journalists noticed changes in his appearance, Klopp openly admitted that he had undergone a hair transplant. "Yes, I had a hair transplant, and it looks great, doesn't it?" He could shout at referees, argue with players, and take defeats extremely hard, but he could also laugh at himself without the slightest discomfort. But his football demanded an enormous amount of energy. The players had to operate at their absolute limit. Klopp himself lived through every attack with them, running along the touchline, waving his arms, and celebrating goals as if he had just scored them himself. Over time, the team began to lose that intensity. In Klopp's final full season, Borussia Dortmund unexpectedly found themselves close to the relegation zone, although they later recovered and reached the German Cup final. In the summer of 2015, he left Dortmund. Klopp said that the club needed change, but even then, one thing had already become clear. His method could transform a team, but it demanded far too much. 10 years before moving to England, Klopp met the person who would become his greatest source of support away from football. In 2005, during an Oktoberfest celebration, he met Ulla Sandrock, a social worker and children's author. They later married. Ulla rarely involved herself in her husband's public life, but at home, Klopp could at least briefly stop being the person from whom everyone constantly expected emotion, decisions, and confidence. In October 2015, that burden reached an entirely new level. Liverpool had not won the English League title for 25 years. The club had a great history, an enormous army of supporters, and an almost painful habit of looking back at the past. At his first press conference, Klopp described himself as the normal one. He did not promise immediate trophies. Instead, he asked the supporters to stop doubting and start believing. Klopp gradually built a team for his football. Mohamed Salah, Sadio Mane, Virgil van Dijk, Alisson, and Fabinho all arrived at Liverpool. But the biggest change happened in the mind. The players began to feel connected to the stands again. Klopp demanded that they thank the supporters after every match, even after defeats. He wanted the stadium and the team to exist as one living organism. In 2018, Liverpool lost the Champions League final to Real Madrid. 1 year later, the team returned to the final and defeated Tottenham. And in the following season, Klopp did what the club had been waiting 30 years for. He won the English League title. In his home village of Glatton, a local bartender once asked an English visitor, "Are you from Liverpool? Then you've come from Klopptown." Klopp had become more than a coach to the city. He constantly gave people his own confidence, the same confidence that had once emerged from a tree drawn across an entire sheet of paper. But that process worked in only one direction. For 9 years, Klopp lived through every match at the absolute limit, competed with Manchester City, rebuilt the team, and kept convincing everyone that one more push was possible. In January 2024, he admitted that he could not continue. "I am running out of energy." He left the team, the city, and the job that had made him one of the greatest coaches of his generation. For the first time in his career, he did not need to save a football club. Now he had to save himself. But even as he walked away from coaching, Klopp left himself one possible way back. In January 2025, Klopp became Red Bull's head of global soccer. He no longer conducted daily training sessions and was no longer responsible for the results of a single team. Instead, he advised clubs, supported coaches, and took part in the development of scouting and an overall football philosophy. For Klopp, it was a way to remain in football without returning to the routine that had drained him at Liverpool. Unfortunately, some German supporters saw the decision as a betrayal. For years, Klopp had been associated with Mainz and Borussia Dortmund, clubs whose identities were built around the stands and their local communities. Now he was working for a corporation that many people in Germany considered a symbol of football's commercialization. Banners accusing him appeared inside stadiums. People asked whether he had forgotten everything he had once said about traditions and supporters. Klopp did not try to justify himself to every critic. He explained that he wanted to continue working, but had no intention of becoming a club coach again. At the same time, his agreement with Red Bull included a clause allowing him to leave for the German national team. After Germany were eliminated from the World Cup, Julian Nagelsmann stepped down. The DFB immediately approached Klopp, and Red Bull agreed to release him early. On July 24, 2026, Jurgen signed a 4-year contract. He begins work on August 15th. His longtime assistants Peter Kravitz and Pep Linders join him, along with Sven Bender, one of the players from his title-winning Borussia Dortmund team. At his first press conference, Klopp admitted that he had already drawn up a list of 57 outfield players. He demanded more intensity, counter-pressing, and a clear structure. But what is his main task if it is not tactics? Germany had failed at several major tournaments and lost its connection with the supporters. The team needed someone capable of restoring its character and making the country believe in the national team again. Klopp said, "I have seen 3 times how successful football can change a city, and successful football can change an entire country." He once changed Mainz, Dortmund, and Liverpool. Now he faces his final and greatest challenge. His father taught Jurgen to keep running when the opponent was stronger. But can Klopp pass that habit on to an entire team one last time and change German football again?